Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. A year ago, I told you about the case of a South Carolina cross burning. That crime was carried out by these two walking birth defects, Warden Butler and his girlfriend, Alexis Hartnett. They are living proof that incest should remain illegal. What they did was they targeted their neighbors, a retired black couple who became the subjects of a campaign of relentless, vicious racial harassment and threats of violence, which the authorities, of course, did nothing about. So on Thanksgiving weekend of 2023, these two criminals burned a cross in the yard of this black couple. Now, because of how over-the-top outrageous this particular crime was, what with a cross burning taking place and all, even the white media couldn't manage to ignore it completely. But nonetheless, even with all the headlines, the Democrat politicians and prosecutors were still vowing that they were going to be stopping Asian hate, never mind the fact that black people are the vast majority of hate crimes victims in America. They just ignored that fact. These two race terrorists who committed this crime had an injunction placed on the home that they had been staying in, which prohibited them from living there while this case was being adjudicated. Well, we've got an update on how this case has turned out, and you can pretty much guess exactly how it went. Last week, the white male who was involved in this crime was allowed to plead guilty to lesser charges, of course, since it was obvious he couldn't get out of it. And for having committed a crime of domestic terrorism and a cross-burning no less, the judge let him off with time served, as if this was a case of jaywalking or something. And as for this racist accomplice, his pet skank or whatever this failed science experiment is, she has yet to have her case adjudicated, but the judge is already making it clear the fix is in, so we can already guess how this one's gonna go. Oh, and on a side note, this hobgoblin was arrested in March of last year for doing jumping jacks in her front yard while topless. I'll bet the punishment for the public indecency charge is going to be more than what she gets for the act of terrorism she took part in. But nonetheless, you can tell both of these two reprobates are trying to put forward some sort of diminished capacity plea.
Warden, is there anything you'd like to say?
I didn't mean any hate towards my community, only trying to bring to the light of the matter that I'm an individual with disability and I have seizures, and has not been rectified by the court or the state in the matter. And I've made multiple complaints, and the only thing I got from the FBI was we're too busy in the matter. So for anybody who deals with seizures, deals with mental disability, and they feel like nobody's there to help you, this is what happens. This is what you get: a guilty plea because they're not willing to provide the evidence to prove anything in the matter.
That's why I want to let him know he got somebody.
Thank you.
This is my brother.
And this was the reason that I thought that it's important that I revisit this crime, because of what you just saw. It's bad enough that this piece of walking excrement is trying to play the victim. He's looking for sympathy. Oh, I've got a mental health problem. No, you have a lack of character problem. These white supremacists are always saying that nothing is ever their fault, and everyone else is to blame. The white supremacists are offended by everything but ashamed of nothing because they contribute nothing. But of course, there's some bootlicking, buck-dancing clown in tow because some Negroes just can't imagine leaving the plantation. Now, I don't know if this clown is a friend of this criminal or not, or perhaps he's more than a friend. Maybe some buck-breaking going on, who can say? It would certainly make sense. But we have to understand that when some fool stands in solidarity with a hate criminal, that makes him an opponent of the black community. This is someone who is trying to use their own melanin as a shield for this anti-black violence. We have to get on code, but a code requires some form of enforcement mechanism. Part of why we keep getting all of this off-code turncoat behavior is because these enemies within know that they can pull dirtbag moves like this, and white power will feed them the next day. They count on that. Also, they figure that there will never be anyone in the black community who's going to hold them accountable for literally embracing the reprobates who attack us. This makes this creep no better and no different than the animal who terrorized that couple. This is not a mental health issue that caused this crime, no matter what this inbred bigot may say. This is a white privilege problem. You want to reduce certain types of crime? Focus the personnel and the resources on it, and then punish it harshly. But when it comes to white supremacist criminality, there's neither focus placed on it, and as we see constantly, there's no punishment at all. In fact, these white supremacists are praised for their crimes. And the scum who stand arm in arm with these criminals, they don't ever get scrutinized. The white media never asks, what's wrong with these people? There's never any effort made to either criticize or critique them. Instead, it's either shrugged and blown off, or in many cases, they try to rationalize it and justify it. Because as far as the white media is concerned, oh, here's a useful idiot who we can put in front of the cameras, and we'll go ahead and make sure that there's no criticism of him. We don't want anyone to think that he's doing something wrong. So he's going ahead and giving us cover to say, hey, the black community's fine with this stuff. In fact, it's no big deal. Why, look at this convenient buck-dancing Negro over here who's saying that he's fine with it. Well, there you have it. Racism is indeed a mental disorder, and we have the confession from the racists themselves. And while we're on the subject of people being publicly indecent, South Carolina is nigga Jim Clyburn's state. And you notice, of course, he was totally quiet about all of this going on. See, when a judge hands down a ruling that Republicans and conservatives don't like, they put a spotlight on that judge. They make a cause celeb out of trying to punish them for it. Fox News, the AM hate radio crowd, the online pundits and racists like Ben Shapiro, aka BS, they put a name on these judges. And they use these judges as a way to focus their base on removing that judge from office and then putting some right-wing nut in their place. They use it as an opportunity to go ahead and take some ground in the public square. You don't ever see Democrats doing that. Hell, in the few cases where a judge was removed by the white left, they had to do it all on their lonesome. Unlike Fox News, who can't wait to cheerlead for a judge to be removed from the bench if they do something the white right doesn't like, these white leftists who had to remove people like Aaron Persky from the bench, they got no support from these so-called left-leaning white media, and of course they got absolutely no support from the Democrat politicians either. And speaking of no support, this incident proves that you can still carry out in the 21st century cross-burnings, lynchings of black people, and any other form of anti-black terrorism you want, and the Democrats won't say boo. All of these extremist laws that these Republicans pass, and these unconstitutional courtroom maneuvers that these white right-wingers keep pulling, Democrats have not done anything about it. They won't even talk about it. All we heard about during both Biden and Harris's presidential campaigns was abortion, abortion, abortion. That and making the illegal alien citizens. Democrats don't do anything because they're also devoted to anti-black racism. The only reason you saw that pathetic gesture they were doing in 2020 was because they didn't want anyone pointing out their own silent and occasionally vocal support for hate crimes against our community. It was a smokescreen on their part to cover up their own complicity and collaboration. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power Tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. Now, the victims of this hate crime were completely and thoroughly ignored, so white power had the ability to go ahead and let these criminals off the hook. And while it is true that this plea deal was timed to coincide with the Orange Man's re-inauguration, let's be serious here. These white supremacists, they've been given carte blanche immunity from law, and that being the case, they could have done this on Martin Luther King Day if they wanted to, and it would have had the exact same amount of white media exposure, which is very little. And that brings me to part of the reason why I wanted to revisit this case for this morning's briefing. Because the wife in this incident, Monica Williams, said, "I think it's far from closure until we can all come together as a community and get a hate crime bill passed." Now that's something that definitely is worth saying. I'm glad that she wasn't getting out there doing the forgive nonsense. And as black people, we do need to point out that there has to be a hate crime bill passed, but it needs to be one specifically for black people. The same way that there's a specific hate crime law passed for Asians, we require one as well. The white media made much ado about how South Carolina doesn't have a state hate crime law. Well, there are federal hate crime laws, and neither the Democrats nor Republicans ever uses them when black people are the victims. And these anti-black racists fully recognize that the lawmakers and the prosecutors and judges are putting up a united front against us. These white supremacists are very sophisticated. They wait to see what's the response going to be after they commit their crimes. Is all hell going to break loose? Is the sky going to fall on their heads? Or is it going to just basically be allowed to die a natural death and nobody comes back to it? So whenever you got these prosecutors and judges and these politicians who decide that they're going to be circling the wagons against us, the enemy recognizes that and it emboldens them. They don't need somebody to spell it out for them, unlike a lot of tethers and bootlicks and backstabbers and shills. These white supremacists understand that when they don't see any opposition to them, when they don't receive vehement opposition to their anti-black hate crimes, that's them being given the green light by the white powers that be. That's why this stuff keeps happening. Reports are that the victims are getting support, whatever that means, from the local branch of the NAACP, which is like getting the last burnt-up kernel left in the bag of popcorn. The NAACP are only out to get publicity for themselves. They are not any sort of real black advocacy anything. They're nothing more than a social club, full stop. And the NAACP allegedly is carrying out an investigation of their own into this case. Well, that investigation can be added to the FBI, who also allegedly investigated this case as well. And what has either the NAACP investigation, whatever that is, or the FBI's investigation produced? Nothing. Even after over a year, nothing. No indictments, no prosecutions, nothing. What the hell's the NAACP gonna do? Put out a press release? Give me a break. This crime happened in 2023. Say, does anyone remember who the president was in 2023? It was just 2 years ago. Oh yeah, Biden and Kamala Harris. Well, Merrick Garland and his immigrant flunky Kristen Clark did nothing about this crime. They allowed the local yokels to have it, and that was because they got tuned up by the family of Ahmaud Arbery, and they were forced to actually have to prosecute a hate crime against a black person, and the DOJ didn't want that to become habit-forming, so since this case got so much publicity, they had to say they were investigating, but they made up their minds they would be damned if they were going to actually do anything. You know, the left corner of the white media is doing a lot of hand-wringing and kvetching about Donald Trump pulling his moves against the FBI. But you know, I haven't complained about Trump wanting to shut them down, and cases like this proves why. The orange man wants to shut down the FBI because they investigated him. I say they should be shut down because they refuse to investigate anybody. I want to know how the refusal of the Democratic Justice Department is any different than what you would expect under a Trump regime. We have to stop telling ourselves that there's some sort of difference between the two major parties. The only difference is that Trump actually admits his racism openly. He doesn't try to hide it. As Brother Malcolm said, I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even when he's wrong, than one who walks up to you like an angel and is nothing but the devil. Better an honest enemy than a false friend. And for the shills and bootlicks and trolls who want to complain about what it is that Trump's DOJ does, I can agree with you on that, but my question is, where the hell was all of your whining and complaining at when you had Biden sitting here giving the green light to all these hate criminals? This underscores why we require a specific anti-black hate crime law, not just at the state level but also the federal level. We are the majority of hate crimes victims in America and always have been. The authorities are often related to, friends of, or in many cases the perpetrators of these hate crimes against us. But I think we're all mature enough to admit that in the fight against anti-black racism, these white supremacists are not going to go down easily or quickly. We have a long road ahead of us. And that being the case, we need to look forward to more practical measures of protection in the here and now. How long until black people take personal protection seriously and get on code hardcore? That is the burning question. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Morris Bodden, Jimmy Whitfield, Jabari Robinson, Reasonable Dude, and Chris Pruitt. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.